say we support Israel, or now they're trying to use different explanations for it. Even Ilhan Omar is trying to use different explanations for it. They keep on moving that bar. Oh, we like Israel, we just don't like Likud. We don't like Bibi Netanyahu. We like, but we don't. They've gotten to the point now where if you can't come to AIPAC, the most centrist organization, where everyone has always gone with this, the common denominator across the board, what you're really saying is, we don't support Israel anymore.
Is the Democratic Party in trouble with Jewish voters? I mean, this stuff, some of these comments from Omar, you don't see anyone on the left. Where's Chuck Schumer? I don't see him speaking up, saying anything. Is this going to, when it comes time for Jewish Americans to get out and vote, are they going to vote Democrat with all this going on?
So there's long been two Jewish votes, really. It's just like there used to be an Irish vote and a Catholic vote, and now we talk about a Catholic vote, not so much about an Irish vote. So there are Jews who think of ourselves as ethnic Jews, and Jews who think of ourselves as faith Jews. The faith vote is strongly with the Republicans and strongly with Donald Trump. Anyone who's voting on a Jewish issue is voting for Donald Trump and the Republicans, mostly already. Oh, not everyone, but the majority, and we'll see that grow. Then the Jews who basically say we're ethnic Jews, they've voted like more like sort of Irish in the sense that they've melded into the general populace. And they're not voting on Jewish issues, and they never vote on Jewish issues. And when the Democratic Party says, and those who are leading the Democratic Party say, oh, the Jews are going to vote for us anyway, don't worry about it. Well, those people are going to vote for them anyway, no matter what they do. That's the problem. The ones who vote based on Jewish interests, they're not going to vote.
It seems to me there's an even bigger issue than pure politics, which is our relationship with Israel is important strategically, obviously, our key ally in the Middle East. Why is MoveOn.org, this far-left group, basically dictating American foreign policy in our approach to Israel?
That's a fantastic question. And, well, let me tell you, right now who's dictating foreign policy is Donald Trump, and he's been amazing. And the reaction on the left has been to push away things that have been across the board agreed on right and left for decades. But it is clear that Donald Trump has been so positive that right now the Democrats have moved in the other direction, as though it's despite Trump on issues that they did. But I do have to say one thing. You introduced me as on the advisory board for Donald Trump, and I have been. But on this issue, recently I took a leave. I'm no longer there now because I'm launching Jexodus, which is the Jewish Exodus movement from the Democratic Party. And we have gotten response, Reform rabbis, ultra-Orthodox Jews, LGBT, young, old, men, women, saying, that's it. We've had it. We want to join with you.
Have you heard from Chuck Schumer to Jen's point earlier?
Actually, you brought that up in the break.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's a disaster. Chuck Schumer calls himself the Shomer, the guardian of Israel, the guardian of the Jews, to play on the Hebrew word. And he has been silent, and people are upset.
Jeff Balba, appreciate you coming in.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. Breaking news out of the White House. Another bold declaration from President Trump on Israel, strengthening once again the U.S. relationship with our strongest ally in the Middle East. All this coming as a group of 2020 Democrats give the cold shoulder to an annual pro-Israel event. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
Good morning, Sandra. And good morning to you. I'm John Scott in for Bill Hemmer. In 30 minutes, we could hear from the president himself as he prepares to leave the White House for a weekend away. The commander-in-chief recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, reversing course on a decades-long policy over disputed land.
This is very much like Jerusalem, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. I did that. Golan Heights is the same thing. For years, other presidents have campaigned. They said they're there. This is sovereignty. This is security. This is about regional security.
It's not about Netanyahu's re-election.
No, I don't. I wouldn't even know about that. I wouldn't even know about that. I have no idea. I hear he's doing okay.
Meanwhile, several Democratic presidential candidates are now skipping next week's AIPAC conference. That list so far includes Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren.
But first we go to Kevin Corke. He is live at the White House with the latest there. Kevin.
John, their absence may speak volumes about where the Democrat Party is headed right now, and while we have yet to hear the president weigh in on that, we have certainly heard him say a great deal about the Golan Heights. So we take it to Twitter, the president effectively making a major policy shift. When you compare it to orthodoxy, he laid out the case for recognizing the long-disputed territory as being part of Israel. He wrote this on Twitter: after 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. Now, that declaration, John, is seen as a significant departure from what many would call foreign policy orthodoxy. But more importantly, at least in the immediate term, it's also seen as a boon to U.S.-Israeli relations and to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
He did it again. First, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. Embassy here. Then he pulled out of the disastrous Iran treaty. He imposed sanctions. But now he did something of equal historic importance. He recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And the message that President Trump has given the world is that America stands by Israel.
And obviously moved Bibi Netanyahu there, but as you can imagine, John, a wide berth of reaction over on Capitol Hill to the president's decision, including among some Democratic White House hopefuls. Tulsi Gabbard writing this on Twitter. Another example of Trump and Netanyahu putting their own political interests ahead of the interests of our respective countries will escalate tensions and likelihood of war between U.S. It will make that Israel, U.S., Syria, Iran, Russia. Ultimately, she calls this short-sighted. Now, as you also pointed out at the very top of this segment, the president is expected to make his way over to Mar-a-Lago within the hour. We're not sure if he'll talk to reporters, but it's a pretty good bet he will. If he does, we promise to pass along. But for now, back to you.
Yeah, definitely get back to us if the president has anything to say there. Kevin Court, thank you.
We'll be watching for that. Meanwhile, as we mentioned, several Democratic 2020 candidates will not be attending the annual AIPAC conference in Washington next week. That decision coming after a progressive advocacy group, MoveOn.org, urged them to skip that pro-Israel conference. David Drucker is a senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. David, good morning to you. So what does their absence say about the direction of the Democratic Party?
Well, look, it's been clear over the past 10 years or so that at least the base of the Democratic Party, and I don't think a lot of old-school veteran Democratic voters feel this way, but the base of the Democratic Party has been much more critical of U.S.-Israeli policy and much more critical of Israel generally, and that's definitely a generational change for Democrats. Now, I don't think that these candidates skipping the AIPAC conference, if any one of them ends up as the Democratic nominee, necessarily means they're going to get fewer Jewish votes. But Donald Trump, despite a very aggressively pro-Israel policy that is generally within the long-standing U.S. consensus in terms of how the U.S. treats Israel, is otherwise not that appealing to Jewish voters who are by and large Democrats and have by and large had a real issue with how the president discusses immigrants generally, both legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. And so I don't think there's much to gain there, except possibly on the margins with certain pockets of Jewish voters, possibly in Florida. Not insignificant, but I don't think this is going to cause some sort of a sea change, even if Democrats continue to move over the next year or so even further away from what has been a consensus. I think the issue is that what is good for Israel is for the foreign policy consensus among both parties to remain as it has been. And the more being pro-Israel becomes defined by one party or another, the more difficult it is for Israel and the tougher it is for people in the United States who care about Israel as a majority Jewish state being protected and safe and secure. This becomes just that much harder.
Does it give the president an opportunity to emphasize his ties to Israel and his support?
Well, he's done that from the beginning. He's moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which is something previous presidents had believed in concept but never done, and this move at the Golan simply adds to that. So I don't think the president really needs to do anything more. I'm just saying that the political ramifications in terms of the president's re-election, I don't think are impacted all that much, given how liberal most Jewish voters are, and given how many problems they have with the tone and tenor of the president's brand of politics.
Meanwhile, Kirsten Gillibrand making some news this week talking about Social Security, giving Social Security to illegal immigrants. She was given a chance to clarify her stance on that and her proposal there, and here she is doing this.
The way you have comprehensive immigration reform is you let the 10, 11 million people who are here now, working now, begin to buy into Social Security. Pay into Social Security, pay into taxes, pay into school taxes, pay their fair share, and over a 10-year period, they will earn their way into citizenship.
So to be clear, David, she is talking about allowing illegal immigrants to pay into Social Security.
Right, so I think we have to make sure we understand what she's talking about, and it wasn't totally clear for me exactly what she's saying. If she is running on the policy of comprehensive immigration reform that would provide a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants currently in the United States, I don't think that's necessarily a losing issue. In fact, it could be a winning issue to run on in 2020. If she's talking about providing or extending federal benefits to illegal immigrants just on its own, I think that's where Democrats get themselves into a whole mess of political trouble, particularly in a lot of swing states where you have a lot of voters that are sympathetic to Democratic economic policies, Democratic foreign policy, but just don't like this idea that you can break the law, come into the country illegally, and then take advantage of federal benefits. Even in instances where some illegal immigrants are clearly paying taxes because they may be illegal, but their checks are being docked just like you and me, it bothers people, and it's one of the reasons why President Trump was able to win in 2016, because he took this issue head on, and in areas where it had a lot of appeal, it was very successful.
Finally, when asked about the Mueller report, we are still waiting. Here it is Friday at the end of the week, where many speculated we would finally see it, the president backing his calls to make this public, let everybody see it.
Yeah, well, I think I pause there because, well, that's kind of what it's like. We're just still waiting. And what I find when I travel, Sandra, in most of the country is even though they're aware of the Mueller investigation and people have opinions on it, they're not focused on it day to day. They're focused on their kids and their jobs, and if they think about politics, they think about health care or foreign policy or tax policy or what have you.
The U.S.-led coalition says, quote, the operation to complete the liberation of Baghouz is ongoing. It remains a hard fight, and ISIS is showing that they intend to keep fighting for as long as possible. ISIS continues to resort to gruesome tactics like suicide attacks and using children as human shields. While ISIS territory has been already recaptured, it's notable that one of the president's maps shows a large residual presence of ISIS in Iraq. One of the reasons he's leaving U.S. forces there, as well as in Syria, John.
All right, Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Thanks very much. Yeah, we have seen in the reporting that our Benjamin Hall has been doing, which has been spectacular. He's not hearing explosions. He's not hearing bombs going off anymore. And think of how that has changed in just the last few years, the horrific things that we were seeing ISIS doing on a daily basis.
And as we await the complete defeat of ISIS in Syria, yes, his reporting's been fantastic from there, and it will continue. Meanwhile, on to this. Breaking news on the murder of a Washington sheriff's deputy killed in the line of duty. We are now learning that an illegal immigrant may have been behind his death. And this.
The Democrats actually are becoming a far-left party. I mean, they're becoming a radical party.
President Trump hitting Democrats on what he calls a sharp shift to the left. Will it take the party off course in 2020? Democratic National Committee, the Democratic National Communications Director joins us later this hour.
Plus, Republicans pushing back against one progressive proposal calling to increase the number of Supreme Court justices. Congressman Mark Green has something to say about that. He will join us next to talk about
intended. You know, they wanted to separate power amongst branches of government. This idea is crazy, and we have to stand against it. So
we're looking, as you speak, at a video shot of the Supreme Court. 3 of its members appointed by President Barack Obama. Does that bother you in particular?
No, I'm for the way our government is set up, and it's just real interesting right now. You know, the at least the elite leadership of the Democrat Party, they want a different country, whether it's packing the court or changing the Electoral College. Or, their House Resolution 1, their number 1 bill in this session, which essentially wants to take California's election system and force it on all the other states. I mean, they're just doing everything they can to put themselves in power and, push their socialist agendas. I think it's crazy. It's a threat to our democracy. We can't stand for this.
Well, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it, though. Republicans are in the minority in the U.S. House. If you propose this constitutional amendment, it's not going to go anywhere under Nancy Pelosi's leadership, is it?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically implore the Speaker she spent her life in the legislative branch. And if we don't close this off and keep these activist judges from being packed into the court, she's basically, her legacy, her lifetime of work in the legislative branch will be undone. So hopefully she'll listen to that reason and, support this amendment.
All right. So in terms of what's going on at the southern border, the Marine Commandant has warned Congress that President Trump's plans, President Trump's involvement in sending troops to the U.S. border is negatively affecting the Marine Corps, that it is preventing them from doing training overseas that they need to be doing, that it's causing problems for reparations that need to be made, repairs that need to be made at bases. What's your response to that?
My response to that is it's time for the Democrat leadership to start funding the military. I mean, if you look at what happened during the Obama administration, the cuts to the military, the cuts to DOD, where they had to sacrifice modernization, they had to sacrifice base, maintenance on installations to maintain readiness. So President Obama or President Trump has done a lot to increase that budget, but you just can't make it all up in just a few years. And so essentially they're under-resourced. And he's basically telling his commander-in-chief, look, these are the resources that we have, and we've got multiple missions, and here's the risk. And you can't blame him for saying that. That's what a commander is supposed to say to the commander-in-chief. But what we need is Congress to fund the Department of Defense and fund the Department of Homeland Security, and they have failed. Our Democrat opponents, at least the elite leadership, would much rather have an open border than they would have a trained Marine, and that is a tragedy, and we are going to continue to point that out and hopefully make some changes in 2020.
Congressman Mark Green, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Fox News now learning that an illegal immigrant is the suspect in the murder of a sheriff's deputy in Washington state. We'll have a live report on that story coming up.
Plus, President Trump telling colleges to back
day after an attempted traffic stop. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. Jeff Paul is live in our West Coast bureau this morning. Jeff, what can you tell us about what happened here?
Yes, Sandra, investigators say the suspect, Juan Manuel Flores del Toro, who died in the shootout, had entered the U.S. through Laredo, Texas back in 2014. While his work visa was expired, authorities say he didn't have any outstanding arrest warrants and had minimal previous contact with police. Now, this all started after law enforcement in Kittitas, Washington, which is about 115 miles east of Seattle, received reports that Flores del Toro was driving erratically. There was then a chase, and at some point it all ended in the sound of gunfire. Deputy Ryan Thompson was killed, and Officer Benito Chavez was shot in the leg, but he is expected to survive.
In that area where this occurred, the troopers and deputies and city police work very close together. So it's touching, not only the one agency, but all.
Now, police say this is the first fatal shooting of a law enforcement officer in that particular Washington county since 1927. Sandra?
And Jeff Paul, thank you. By the way, and Jeff, I'm sorry, second part of this, how is the community responding to all this? I know that there's been some amazing images that have come out in support of him.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Deputy Thompson, who died, leaves behind a wife and 3 kids. So for the folks who live in that area where the shootout happened, it's hitting those people very hard.
I just couldn't imagine what that family's going through right now. I can't.
It's just tragedy. We just all have to pull together as a community and be supportive for each other.
Now, we should mention the other law enforcement officer involved who was shot in the leg is only 22 years old. He is just one of 3 officers in that local police department. Sandra?
Jeff Paul from Los Angeles this morning for us. Jeff, thank you.
Meanwhile, President Trump is weighing in on the slate of 2020 Democratic candidates in a brand new interview this morning.
My attitude is I wouldn't mind. I mean, I'd love to have Biden. I'd love to have Bernie. I'd love to have Beto. I mean, Beto seems to be the one that the press has chosen. The press seems to have chosen Beto.
And so will the president have any impact on the Democratic race? We'll get brand new reaction from the Democratic National Committee right after the break.
Plus, the Midwest still under siege by widespread flooding. A live report on the damage and the huge cleanup effort.
It was time to update the bathroom.
But we wanted to work with a company we could trust. Rebath gave us the bathroom
we always wanted.
Call 866-5REBATH for your free in-home design consultation today.
This is PillPack. It's my new pharmacy. PillPack sorts my medication for me and delivers it directly to my door every month. Even better, their service is free. I only pay my copays. Does your pharmacy do that? Visit pillpack.com today.
They're my closest friends. We've been through a lot together. Seeing our kids off to college, Kelly losing her mom, my 50th birthday. I trust them with so much. So when it came to my finances, I trusted Kelly's referral to her Ameriprise advisor. Beth gives me the comprehensive advice that helps me feel confident my financial future is secure. With the right financial advisor, life can be brilliant. Ameriprise Financial.
Do you have any idea how your mattress affects your body and how well you sleep? Is it too hard or too soft, causing you to wake up with sore shoulders, back, or hips? Are you uncomfortable because you're too hot or too cold? Now you can get the total body support you need and the better sleep you want with the new MyPillow mattress topper.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. When I invented my new MyPillow mattress topper, I made it to have everything you'd ever want in a topper. My mattress topper helps give you the support you need, helps relieve your pressure points, and regulates your body temperature for you as an individual. It comes with a 10-year warranty. You can wash and dry the cover. It's made in the USA, and I back it with my 60-day money-back guarantee.
Go to MyPillow.com or call now to get your very own MyPillow mattress topper. Use the promo code and Mike will give you 30% off and 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free. Order now.
MyPillow topper delivers on its promise to give me a better night's sleep.
I can sleep all night through, and it's a miracle for me.
Mike's exclusive 3-layer design starts with a layer of MyPillow foam, providing you superior support and comfort. The second layer of transitional foam evenly distributes body weight and helps relieve uncomfortable pressure points for optimal comfort. Mike's ultra soft outer layer is a patented temperature regulating cover that helps keep you at your ideal sleeping temperature all night long. Unlike other sleep systems costing thousands, the MyPillow mattress topper takes comfort to a whole new level without any wires, remotes, or moving parts. Call now or go to MyPillow.com to order your MyPillow topper. Use the promo code to save 30%. When you do, Mike will give you 2 of his standard MyPillows absolutely free. That's right, 2 standard MyPillows free and 30% off your MyPillow topper today. Order now.
I personally guarantee it's going to change your bed into the most comfortable bed you'll ever own.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
A Fox News alert: President Trump set to leave the White House just moments from now. He'll be heading to Florida for the weekend after a very busy week of national events. We will bring you the president's remarks if he stops to talk to reporters.
Democrats actually are becoming a far left party. I mean, they're becoming a radical party. You look at what they want to do with the Supreme Court. You look at what they want to do with the voting age. Where did that come all of a sudden? The voting age at 16. They're becoming radical. They are radicalized.
President Trump there on the Democrats hoping to run against him next year, rejecting some of the party's proposals with more than a dozen candidates now in the running. Sochi Hinojosa is a communications director for the Democratic National Committee. Thankful that you're here this morning. Have a lot to ask you about. Sochi, good morning to you.
Me.
All right, so let's start first with the president's observation there that there is a hard left turn in your party. He wouldn't be the only one making that observation right now.
Well, I think Donald Trump has a lot of thoughts about the Democratic Party because, frankly, he's scared about who he's going to potentially face. Right now, you have a dozen or so candidates crisscrossing the country talking about the issues that people care about, whether it's healthcare or the economy. And we're going to have a robust discussion over the next year and a half or the next year or so talking about these issues. We have 12 debates happening. They start in June, and everyone's going to come forward with our ideas. It's okay to come forward with bold, progressive ideas and have the voters decide who they want as a Democratic nominee. So we're going to see this process play out, but we're out there talking about the issues while Donald Trump is out there trying to instill fear in communities. And so I think that voters will see this, and it will only help the Democratic Party to have this robust discussion.
Among those bold progressive ideas that you just mentioned, lowering the voting age, abolishing the Electoral College, packing the Supreme Court, is that the direction that the Democratic Party is moving in for 2020?
I think Democrats have been very clear, and especially when you're looking at the 2018 election, we saw that we won on issues like healthcare and the economy. And for the most part, candidates are talking about those issues. There will be other issues that we bring up across the primary, and it'll be up to the voters to decide whether or not they like those ideas.
That doesn't sound like
for
a huge endorsement of those issues on your part, though.
Well, I think that there are a lot of issues confronting our country right now. And you had a Republican Congress that didn't deal with pretty much anything over the last 2 years that they had the presidency. And so Democrats are really eager to make a lot of changes to many different issues. But the reality is that healthcare and the economy continue to be the two issues that voters care about and that the Democratic Party will be talking about.
Meanwhile, Kirsten Gillibrand clarifying her comments about expanding Social Security to illegal immigrants in Las Vegas. Let's listen to her words first, and I'll ask you about it.
The way you have comprehensive immigration reform is you let the 10, 11 million people who are here now, working now, begin to buy into Social Security. Pay into Social Security, pay into taxes, pay into school taxes, pay their fair share, and over a 10-year period, they will earn their way into citizenship.
Is that something that the party is throwing their support behind?
Well, I would take her entire comments. What she was saying, people are focusing on Social Security, but what she's actually saying is that we need comprehensive immigration reform. And so what I would say is, yes, most Democrats, if not all Democrats who are running for president, believes there should be a pathway to citizenship. Now, a pathway to citizenship means that you have to play by the rules, that you need to pay taxes. There is a process in order to do that. And we know that our immigration system is broken. I think Republicans can agree with us on that, but they believe a solution is a border wall, and we believe it's comprehensive immigration reform. To be clear,
playing by the rules, you have to be a resident of the United States to pay into Social Security for a period of time before you can actually receive anything from it. That's not what she's talking about here.
Well, what we believe comprehensive immigration reform, and this needs to be a bipartisan agreement, because that's the only way that comprehensive immigration reform would get passed. As we saw in 2013, it passed the Senate and it didn't go to the House, didn't bring it up. But there will be a system in place so that people can play by the rules and pay their taxes and do those things, and then eventually get the benefits that American citizens would get. But that is a process that Congress needs to come up with, and that's what we've been clear about.
All right. Obviously, huge news this morning is the number of Democratic presidential candidates who are saying that they are going to avoid AIPAC altogether. This is an annual pro-Israel conference, and we've got a full screen we can throw up on the picture here. There are prominent Democratic speakers going to be at that conference, including Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. These Democratic presidential candidates on the screen here, among them Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and others, say that they will not attend. And this is after the organization MoveOn.org called on these candidates not to attend. They claim that AIPAC worked to derail the nuclear agreement with Iran, which obviously was Obama's work.
Well, I think that what you're seeing, and as you mentioned, there are some Democrats speaking, but generally, as a matter of fact, is Democrats have been very clear where they stand in their support for Israel and a two-state solution.
Which is
what you have is a two-state solution. So Netanyahu specifically, I think that he is up for re-election. I think he is using this trip to the U.S., for his re-election. And I think what you're seeing right now is he's someone who is under indictment, but also not only that, I mean, he is undermining the two-state solution. And so I think what's happening right now is, it is up to every presidential candidate where they want to speak, where they want to make their voice heard, and what organizations they want want to support. But I think, when it comes to this, I think this is probably why they're not attending, is because they don't want this to be a political game. And
well, let me tell you why Bernie Sanders says he's not attending. He says he's very concerned about the stage that AIPAC gives to leaders who have expressed extreme positions who oppose the two-state solution. I just wonder, with that many presidential candidates from the Democratic Party saying that they will not attend a pro-Israel event, I just wonder what message that is sending from your party.
Well, I leave that up to the presidential candidates. I don't speak for each of those candidates, but I will say, as a whole, as a Democratic Party, we will never waver in our support for Israel. We believe that there must remain a strong support, bipartisan support for Israel, and we continue to stand there.
All right. Joe Biden, what is the latest? Is he getting in? We're still left to speculate here.
Your guess is as good as mine. I have not heard anything new. I think that whether Joe Biden gets in, whether he picks a running mate, or whether you have other candidates get in, I think that the large field, we have a lot of qualified candidates, and any of those with their ticket could beat Donald Trump.
All right, Xochitl Hinojosa, we always appreciate having you on America's Newsroom. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Cleanup efforts underway across the Midwest after massive flooding hits 8 states. At least 4 deaths now blamed on the floods. Mike Tobin is live in Illinois with the latest. What's the main concern today, Mike?
Well, John, as the water moves south, the big concern is whether the levees are going to hold as they fight back against the floodwaters. As we look at places like Winthrop, Missouri, those people there got the order last night, get out of town, because the water had overtopped the levee that was protecting that particular little town. They left as the water trickled in, wondering if they would still have a town when it all goes down now that the floodwaters have arrived.
But it wouldn't, because we worked so hard to get this place built up and everything. And but like I said, what are you going to do?
Now, with the Mississippi surging as well, crews in the Twin Cities were working to fill sandbags in Stillwater, Minnesota, to create their own levee and keep the big river out of their homes and businesses. The Army Corps of Engineers provided information yesterday that in the Missouri River Basin,
Investigation after those 2 deadly plane crashes. Indonesia airline Garuda announcing it will cancel a nearly $5 billion order for 50 Boeing 737 MAX 8 jets. Boeing representatives plan to visit Jakarta next week to discuss the cancellation with the airline.
There are many threats to Israel and to the United States that we will work on together in the days and weeks and months ahead. We will redouble our efforts to make sure that we protect all that is important to Israel, all that is important to America, and indeed all that is important to the world.
That's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo affirming the strong ties between the United States and Israel, as President Trump announces his support of Israeli control over the disputed Golan Heights. The president yesterday tweeting, after 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. Let's talk about it with General Jack Keane, a retired U.S. Army 4-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and a Fox News senior strategic analyst. This declaration by the president, General Keane, your reaction to it?
Yeah, well, it reflects the contours of change that have taken place in the Middle East. Clearly, the status quo since 1967 of Israel occupying that and not recognizing as having sovereignty over it has been the status we've been in. So what has been the change? One word: Iran. Iran has taken control of central and western Syria, and for the last 3 years has been encroaching on the security of the Israelis, so much so that they've conducted over 100 airstrikes, John, into central and western Syria to push back on the Iranian proxies, the Hezbollah. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to establish missile bases in Syria so they can clearly fire them at Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So that is what is happening. The Arabs, John, will protest this to a certain degree, like they did the change of the embassy to Jerusalem. But it will not be a serious protest. It'll go quiet right after that. Why? Because the Arabs are working with the Israelis to push back on the Iranians' malign and aggressive behavior. This is all about Iran.
So it sounds like you don't see a real downside to the president's decision here.
No, not whatsoever. You know, if you've ever stood on the Golan Heights and looked into Syria, you can see for miles. And right now, today, you can actually see the pro-regime forces and the Iranian proxies to Hezbollah from the Golan Heights. If Israel was not on the Golan Heights, you know who would be there? The Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, would be right there. So this is a decision. The status quo is not being broken by Israel. The status quo is being broken by the Iranians who took control of Syria with the single purpose in mind to encroach on Israel.
And worth pointing out that Israel only grabbed the Golan Heights after Syria and its Arab neighbors tried to attack Israel and overrun it back during the Six-Day War.
Yeah, absolutely. And likely it's in some future negotiations, if the Iranians had not taken this bold move to establish Syria as their strategic anchor point in the Middle East, there would have been a possibility for some negotiations over that piece of terrain in some future peace deal. But that's not going to happen now because the Iranians are clearly challenging the security and sovereignty of the state of Israel.
I want to get some quick thoughts from you on the situation regarding ISIS. The president says the caliphate has crumbled. All signs indicate that's the case. Where do we go from here, General?
Well, hats off to the United States military, the 2,200 involved in that, all the airstrikes and pilots that are involved for the last 4 years. That's a significant accomplishment. The Trump administration accelerated this process. The Obama administration was sort of dragging their heels, and we put more capacity in there, and also with the direction, let's get this done as quickly as possible. The challenge now is we need to deal with ISIS as it moves into its other phase, which they're already preparing for, and that is a terrorist network operating inside Syria and also in Iraq. We got to keep our foot on their throats so they don't reemerge and retake territory, and that is why we're going to keep some forces there, and most importantly, John, maintain control of the airspace.
Yeah.
That is critical.
General Jack Keane, our senior strategic analyst, thank you.
Good talking to you, John.
President Trump saying American students and American values are under siege on college campuses. And yesterday he took action to make sure free speech will always have a home at universities.
As he was getting ready to board Marine One, he spoke to reporters there. He is talking about his views of Israel and his potential opponents' views of Israel. Also saying that he'll be having meetings this weekend regarding China and the future of the Caribbean with those Caribbean leaders. We have all of this as Marine One, you can see there, lifts off from the South Lawn. We have his remarks. We're queuing them up now, and we will bring them to you shortly.
Today's action is just the beginning of our efforts to protect free speech and advance our students' rights agenda. What I've been witnessing over the last long period of time, long before I became president, what I've been witnessing is outrageous.
Meanwhile, that was President Trump responding to conservatives who say their voices are silenced on college campuses, signing an executive order aimed at promoting free speech. The president warning that if schools and universities do not comply, they could lose federal funding. Let's bring in Cabot Phillips, media director for campusreform.org. You were there yesterday, Cabot. Why is the president taking this action?
Because it's needed. For too long, there has been no accountability. Universities have been able to gobble up billions of dollars in taxpayer money and at the same time routinely deny free speech rights to students. I've been on over 100 college campuses in the last 3 years with the Leadership Institute's campus reform, and I've seen firsthand what it looks like. It might be universities telling students, well, you only have free speech, First Amendment rights in these free speech zones, which are oftentimes no larger than a parking spot on an entire campus. I've seen conservative groups lose funding from the university because they don't agree ideologically with them. I've seen speakers be disinvited. I've had to face these kind of threats personally from administrators, professors, students. Right now, on college campuses, free speech is not welcome. They're not a marketplace of ideas where debate is encouraged. And I do think it's important for the president to step in, use his bully pulpit to say, if you're taking federal money, you have to defend the Constitution.
This is part of the president's vision to, quote, making higher education more transparent and holding institutions more accountable. Will it be effective?
It remains to be seen what the teeth behind it will be. A big part of it is universities, when they request federal research grants, they have to meet a certain threshold to show that they are going to be doing enough to fulfill their job of defending the First Amendment. So it's still, we're seeing how it's going to be rolled out. But I think a big part of this also is just bringing eyes to it, making sure universities know that people are paying attention. The President of the United States is paying attention. And the President's job is to protect the Constitution, defend the Constitution. And so this certainly falls under his area of expertise and area of what he should be doing. And I think it's also going to benefit liberal students as well as conservative students. It's not just conservative students that will grow. Liberal students routinely hear the same ideas every day in class. They're not accustomed to being challenged by outside beliefs because oftentimes conservative beliefs are just kept off campus. So now liberal students will have more of a chance to grow intellectually, to be challenged, to become stronger in their beliefs. So it's going to make all people better off. And when a university environment is open for dialogue, open for debate and discussion, all people benefit.
Hear your passion on it, Cabot. We're waiting the president, by the way. That should be happening in just a few moments. But final thoughts from you, Cabot, on the reaction that you've seen so far in the college and the university community to this?
I think a lot of administrators and professors are scared because they realize that their actions might be held accountable. They might, be costing their university dollars if they aren't doing enough to create a good environment for free speech. And I think that's a good thing. And so I think this is going to be empowering for students around the country that have had their rights denied. It's a wake-up call for them, and I applaud President Trump for bringing eyes to this.
Cabot Phillips, your piece, "The Left Should Support President Trump in Protecting Free Speech." It's out there for everybody to read. Cabot, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Fox News Alert, we told you that President Trump is heading down to the winter White House, if you will, in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, his resort there. He's going to be having a working weekend of sorts, meeting with a number of Caribbean leaders, talking about China and some other issues. He just boarded Marine One, and before he did so, he stopped to talk to the reporters assembled there after shaking some of the hands of the folks. Here is what the president had to say this morning.
I'm going to Florida. We have meetings with the 5 Caribbean leaders. That'll be at Mar-a-Lago. We have a lot of other meetings set up for this weekend on trade. We have a lot of talks with China, and a lot of things are happening. We'll be doing it from Florida, and a lot of very important things are happening. Congressional investigation. Yeah.
And you said Democrats are anti-Israel and that they're anti-Jewish. They're all shipping the AIPAC conference because you're not going as well.
The Democrats have very much proven to be anti-Israel. There's no question about that. And it's a disgrace. I mean, I don't know what's happened to them, but they are totally anti-Israel. Frankly, I think they're anti-Jewish. Congressional investigation. Yeah, we're being very, very strong on the border. The number is enormous of people that we've captured, people that we've apprehended, but we're going to take care of it. We are being very, very tough at the border. Congressional investigations, Mr. President. Are you telling your staff not to comply? It's just a continuation of the same witch hunt. They know it, and behind closed doors, they laugh at it. It's just a continuation of the same nonsense. Everybody knows. They ought to go to work, get infrastructure done, and get a lot of other things done instead of wasting everybody's time. Why didn't you get more interview with the special counsel, sir? I can't hear you. I know nothing about it. I've never heard that. I've never heard about it.
If Robert Mueller is presiding over a hoax, do you think Robert Mueller is personally dishonest in his whole thing?
Well, we're going to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting, but we'll see what happens. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. Everybody knows it. It's all a big hoax. I call it the witch hunt. It's all a big hoax. So we'll see what happens. I know that the Attorney General, highly respected, ultimately will make a decision.
Mr. President, is there even a peace process?
There won't be, and if there is, it'll only play to our advantage.
All right, so the president there telling the assembled reporters that he is not at all concerned about what is coming out in the Mueller report. Is that report coming out this weekend? Sandra, you seem to think it might be.
Called it the continuation of the same witch hunt. Behind closed doors, they laugh at it, said the president on the ongoing investigation. I have absolutely no idea is how he began when asked about the release of the Mueller report, as he has been calling for it to be made public. He also continued to make comments on the Democratic presidential candidates who have said that they will not be going to AIPAC next week, at which Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi will be speaking. It's an annual pro-Israel event. He was answering questions there and said they are the party that is anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. Peter Ducey has more from Washington on that story after several of those presidential candidates said they are skipping it. They're not going to AIPAC. Peter?
Sandra, it hasn't even been 6 weeks since Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was widely condemned for tweeting that AIPAC was paying politicians to support Israel. Now, Democratic presidential candidates are staging more of a silent protest, skipping the annual meeting of the American Israel Political Affairs Committee. Kamala Harris, not going. Elizabeth Warren, not going. Beto O'Rourke, not going. And he just explained why.
I'm here in South Carolina. I'm here in front of people who will decide who the Democratic nominee is, who are going to decide this next election, who will decide who will defeat President Trump and then bring this country together. That's the best way for me to spend this time.
These boycotts came after pressure from the progressive MoveOn.org, whose campaign director said this: "It's no secret that AIPAC has worked to hinder diplomatic efforts like the Iran deal, is undermining Palestinian self-determination and inviting figures actively involved in human rights violations to its stage." Democrats from Congress are still going to show their support, though, including Senator Bob Menendez, Hakeem Jeffries, and Congressman Brad Sherman. And everybody that isn't showing up could be sending a strong signal to America's closest ally in the Middle East, according to Trump advisors.
They've gotten to the point now where if you can't come to AIPAC, the most centrist organization where everyone has always gone with this, the common denominator across the board, what you're really saying is we don't support Israel anymore.
Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton both addressed AIPAC in the past, but a lot has changed since the last Democratic primaries. Sandra?
Peter Ducey, thank you.
And it is an election year. The White House, Washington, and all of America waiting for Robert Mueller's report on Russian election meddling. The special counsel expected to deliver his findings soon to the Attorney General, William Barr. He will decide what the public gets to see. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live in Washington with more on that. Catherine.
Well, thank you, John, and good morning. We are working to confirm reporting this morning from ABC News that no more indictments are anticipated. We know here at Fox independently that special counsel investigators are taking steps that are consistent with tying up loose ends, including closeout interviews with witnesses. Almost all the key players were at the Justice Department yesterday. The Attorney General William Barr, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, former acting Attorney General Whitaker for a presentation to the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The report was not delivered yesterday, and those close to the process suggested it was unlikely given the timing of this very public event. Next steps, as you mentioned, are guided by federal regulations known as 28 CFR 600 that explicitly state the Mueller report is confidential to the Attorney General and must outline prosecutions and declinations. Those are cases where no criminal action is taken. Listen carefully to this exchange from Barr's confirmation hearings, where he commits to transparency, but he appears to stop short of releasing the full Mueller findings.
Will you provide Mueller's Mueller's report to Congress, not your rewrite or a summary?
The regs do say that Mueller is supposed to do a summary report of his prosecutive and his declination decisions, and that they will be handled as a confidential document. I am going to try to get the information out there consistent with these regulations, and to the extent I have discretion, I will exercise that discretion to do that.
Separately, Fox News has obtained these text messages between former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page. That shows that there was deep concern within the Justice Department over a surveillance warrant application just 9 days before one was obtained for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. The texts also show that the two exchanged derogatory blogs about then candidate Trump and used very derogatory language to describe former GOP chairman Trey Gowdy. John.
Catherine Herridge. Catherine, thank you.
Catherine,
you're welcome.
Bring in our A-team Friday morning, and look who's here. Ed Henry, chief national correspondent, Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist at Real Clear Politics. Good morning to all of you. Let's start off first with the Mueller report. The first thing the president said when he walked out and talked to cameras for a bit there before heading down to Mar-a-Lago was he doesn't know when we're going to see this, when it's coming out. Neither do we.
Nobody knows when we're going to see it. Nobody knows what's going to be in it. What I find fascinating is you have people who have been sharp critics of the president, though, seem to be laying the groundwork for there not being a whole lot in this report. You got James Comey writing an op-ed in the New York Times saying, I don't know whether there's evidence of collusion or obstruction of justice, and I don't care. I don't care. He's the guy who started this whole thing. He said under oath to Congress that he had one of his friends leak memos of his conversations with the president so a special counsel would be named. So we've been investigating whether or not there's collusion with Russia for 2 years. And even James Comey is saying he's not really sure it's there. So I think the bottom line is nobody knows what's in the report. And the president, after calling it a witch hunt, he may be able to say at some point, oh, actually, Bob Mueller did a fair job.
Yeah, and the president just made some remarks about this impending release. Here's the president this morning.
Well, we're going to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting, but we'll see what happens. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. Everybody knows it. It's all a big hoax. I call it the witch hunt. It's all a big hoax. So we'll see what happens. I know that the Attorney General, highly respected, ultimately will make a decision.
So, no collusion, says the president. We don't know when this thing's coming, but it does seem like all of Washington is getting ready for it to sort of land with a thud.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there are different theories about the holes that Bob Mueller has intentionally left in many of his indictments. They keep calling them speaking indictments that show that the Paul Manafort connection with the Russians, the real actual collusion, which may or may not rise to the level of the legal definition of conspiracy, his sharing polling data with Konstantin Kilimnik, and these other episodes have not been dealt with in his sentencing and his charging thus far, which is why you saw Judge Amy Berman Jackson last week at his sentence and say collusion is a non sequitur because that is the subject of a different investigation which is ongoing. Is it possible that there is a sealed indictment about Paul Manafort conspiring with the Russians? It's possible. We just have no idea. And what's interesting is we're all talking about the Mueller report landing. What we're going to be looking at is the next huge political fight, which is what is Bill Barr, the Attorney General's discretion? What kind of executive privilege and what sort of redactions can the White House legal team claim and therefore make? When would the public ever see any of this? Will the Justice Department follow those policies they say they're going to, which is in making decisions on declinations, they will not tell us damaging information about people who aren't under indictment. So we don't even know the beginning of what we're going to be talking about whenever this does land.
One, Newt Gingrich, the former speaker, used some strong words in an op-ed on FoxNews.com to make the case why this should be made public and the American people should see it. Make the Mueller report public, he writes, here's why. The special counsel's office is treating the duly elected president of the United States and his associates as though they were a murderous organized crime family. This is why the Mueller report should be made public. The American people should be able to see how far Mueller and his team have been willing to levy the power of the government to torment people and extract cooperation from them in a political investigation, writes Newt Gingrich.
Well, let me begin on a point of agreement. I think that the bottom line is I agree with Newt Gingrich that you got to make this document public. Where I disagree with him is I don't think anybody's been tormented or unfairly subjected to the power of government. Clearly, by the way, you have Republicans here, not only Jim Comey, not only Jeff Sessions, but guess who? Robert Mueller, all Republicans. And so I don't see that somehow. Hang on, let me finish. So the point that I think is critical here is even before we all start debating whatever's in the Mueller report, whether it's a small report with a few announcements of these are the indictments I made and these are the declinations that I decided on, or a lengthy report. The question is, what do we as the American people get to see? That's why I agree with Newt Gingrich. It's the case right now that President Trump didn't want Jeff Sessions in that job because he recused himself, led Rod Rosenstein in place, and Rosenstein, by the way, has extended his stay. And Rosenstein and Barr will now decide what we see.
Do we know why that is, by the way?
Yeah, because the regulation gives him that authority.
Right.
But this is so political.
Am I allowed to talk?
Of course.
Go ahead.
Paul Manafort, first of all, when you said there was no government overreach here, did you ever read about Paul Manafort's home, the FBI charging in to drag him out at 6 in the morning or something like that?
What are you talking about?
You don't remember
that was
that part
standard
of the investigation?
operations. You make it out like it was some effort by some group of
Ed, let me let you respond to the president spoke further and went more in depth in this interview with Maria on the Mueller investigation yesterday. Here he is.
Think of it. I have a deputy appoints a man to write a report on me to make a determination on my presidency. People will not stand for it. Now, with all of that being said, for 2 years we've gone through this nonsense because there's no collusion with Russia. You know that better than anybody. And there's no obstruction. They'll say, oh, well, wait, there was no collusion. That was a hoax. But he obstructed in fighting against the hoax. OK, think about that one for a second.
All right, so that was the president in his own words talking to Maria. Ed, I want to move on to AIPAC because now we have a long and growing list of Democratic presidential candidates who say they will not attend this pro-Israel conference next week, at which, look who are the speakers. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, leaders of the Democratic Party. So what happens now, because we haven't yet heard from them, but we have heard from those candidates who say they will not go.
This is another example of how the left has taken over the 2020 race already. I'm sorry, but you've got all these candidates in a race to see who's a bigger socialist already. And now you have MoveOn.org, which started back in the Clinton impeachment and the Iraq war on the very left, dictating which Democrats are allowed to go to AIPAC or not, and whether being pro-Israel is a problem. Israel's our key ally in the Mideast, number one. Number two, I'm old enough to have covered Barack Obama when crazy hard-right conservatives like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton spoke to AIPAC. This is hardly a controversial group, but somehow it's been made out to be that you can't show up at AIPAC.
Is it, Juan, a response to MoveOn.org?
Not at all. I think it's a response to President Trump. He's the one that's politicized Israel in an effort to try to make Israel into an issue that would somehow draw in Jewish voters to the Trump side. I think he only got like 25% of the Jewish vote in 2016, especially after moving the capital to Jerusalem, the move he made this week with regard to the Golan Heights, and in support, by the way, of the political campaign, ongoing campaign of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. I think a lot of Democrats who are running feel this thing has been politicized to a fairly well, and then you throw in the kind of antagonism that we saw towards the idea of a full-throated debate about abandonment of the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. I think a lot of people think, hey, this is just pure politics. And as you point out, John, several leading Democrats are speaking. They're just not the ones that are running.
So you obviously support the presidential candidate's decision not to go. What about Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer if they still go?
I didn't say I supported them. What I said was I think that this has been politicized by President Trump to an extent that people who are running for a political office see themselves not having any advantage in showing up.
AB, MoveOn.org did call on these presidential candidates not to go, and they claim that AIPAC worked to derail the nuclear agreement with Iran. That was one of their cases. They made many. And on the grounds that the lobby uses anti-Muslim and anti-Arab rhetoric.
You know, this is a missed opportunity for Democrats. This is causing huge tension in the party, which is why the congressional leadership is going to be there, just like Barack Obama was and Kamala Harris was 2 years ago. It doesn't make sense to skip this event and protest and look like you're answering to MoveOn.org. Beto O'Rourke's comments about his better use of his time on the campaign trail make perfect sense. But what they should do is go to AIPAC and say, you know what? As a party, many of us feel we have criticism with Benjamin Netanyahu's policies. AIPAC has stood they're on the record opposing his affiliation with what they call racist politicians in another party in Israel. AIPAC has. This is an opportunity for Democrats to go and put some distance and diffuse this debate and say we're still standing with our ally Israel and explain what this is instead of letting Rashida Tlaib and AOC and Ilhan Omar determine the debate of Democrats and Israel.
Yeah, this was she's right. Just a couple of weeks ago, AB makes a great point that Ilhan Omar, we can't forget that she made these anti-Semitic comments. AIPAC was in the middle of those comments, and even Nancy Pelosi had to say enough is enough. Now, they watered down the resolution. We don't have to rehash history, but that's out there. Yes, you're right, Juan. The president's tried to make political hay out of that. Well, it's a pretty darn bad thing that was going on, number one. And number two, in terms of move on, when they say, oh, AIPAC was trying to derail the Iran nuclear deal during Obama, I think AIPAC would say, in fairness, they were trying to make that deal stronger to protect American national security and to protect Israel. That's hardly a foolish position.
I think we can have that debate, but I think when you see what the president has done, it's sort of, reversing bipartisan American policy with regard not only to the moving the capital to Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, but abandoning the two-state solution and discussions of what American policy should be. At some point, I think you have a